She didn't know how she was.
There's somebody hurt.
Yes, she was on the ground, had a girl on the ground. Her husband's a cop. The person just ran down the alley.
A life sentence with eligibility of parole after 20 or 25 or 30 years, or a life sentence without the eligibility or possibility of parole.
Beneath a world of facades, where females are expected to embody empathy and grace, some have committed crimes that reveal the darkest aspects of human nature, challenging our understanding of evil. From Celeste Owens' brutal violence to Shauna Nelson's ruthless jealousy, these female criminals have crossed every moral boundary. Let's begin.
She was located with 3 white-colored trash bags around her body.
On November 19th, 2021, a mother's worst fear was reported. 8-year-old Amari Hall was missing. Her mother, Brittany Hall, and her mother's partner, Celeste Alexandria Owens, claimed they woke up to find that Amani had disappeared from their hotel room in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Panic set in, and authorities quickly launched a search for the young girl. However, as officers began their investigation, troubling details emerged. Celeste Owens, 32, told police she had gone to her grandmother's house the night before and had only just returned that morning, discovering Amari was gone, but something didn't add up. Investigators found inconsistencies in Owens' story, and when they checked her phone records, they uncovered disturbing searches. What to do when a child just doesn't listen? Lakes near me. How do sewers on the streets work? And how do I report someone missing? It became clear that Owens wasn't telling the truth. Officers also noticed bruises and injuries on Amari's 2 younger siblings. It wasn't long before police made a heartbreaking discovery. Amari had not run away. She had been killed. Investigators traced Owens' movement through surveillance footage. They saw her renting a U-Haul van and driving towards DeKalb County. Days later, officers found a shallow grave in a wooded area off Stone Mill Drive. Inside was the body of little Amari. Before the trial began, she laughed as if she had no shame for what she did.
Seen here smiling and laughing just minutes before her first appearance, is accused of killing Amari.
During the trial, prosecutors revealed that Owens and Amari's mother, Brittany Hall, had been mistreating the child for months. Investigators found over a dozen videos on Owens' phone showing them tormenting all 3 children. Medical experts testified that Amari suffered from severe malnutrition and battered child syndrome, meaning she had been mistreated repeatedly over time. Her body showed multiple blunt force injuries, internal bleeding, and fractures. The evidence was overwhelming. Owens had not only taken Amari's life, but she had tried to cover it up. After a trial that lasted weeks, it took the jury just 2 hours to reach a verdict. Celeste Owens was found guilty on all 21 charges, including malice murder and felony murder. The judge, deeply disturbed by the case, called it the most evil act of child cruelty she had ever seen. During the sentencing, Amari's family spoke through tears. Her grandmother, Barbara Wright, said, "My heart is broken into millions of pieces that I have not been able to put back together."
My heart is broken into millions and millions of pieces that I have not been able to put back together.
Owens was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 235 years. She will never walk free again. Yet she shows no guilt. Her face remains blank, displaying no emotion regarding her actions or her sentencing.
Count 3, felony murder, guilty. Count 4, felony murder, guilty. Count 5, cruelty to children in the first degree, guilty.
The case of Amari Hall is a heart-wrenching reminder of the importance of protecting and caring for children. Every child deserves to grow up in a safe and loving environment. While justice has been served, nothing can undo the tragedy of her loss. Her story encourages us all to be more aware, to listen when children need help, and to always stand up for their safety and well-being. Brittany Hall, Amari's mother, still awaits trial. But one thing is clear, Amari's suffering did not go unnoticed, and those responsible will face the consequences. Amari's case shows that guardians can be the greatest threat. The next case reveals how manipulation can drive a teenager to commit an unthinkable crime.
What is going on? What is going on?
It all began with a frantic 911 call from a young girl on the night of November 16, 2012. Panic filled the line. No one knew exactly what was happening, but one thing was certain. Something truly horrific was unfolding. Sabrina Zunich, a teenager in foster care, found herself entangled in a deadly love triangle that led to the brutal murder of her foster mother, Lisa Knafel. Behind this horrific act, however, was a manipulative plan orchestrated by none other than Lisa's husband, Kevin Knafel. Sabrina Zunich had been living with the Knafel family in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. Lisa Knafel, a 41-year-old social worker, had taken Sabrina in as her foster daughter, providing her with a home and stability. However, what Lisa didn't know was that her husband, Kevin Knafel, had been grooming Sabrina. He manipulated her into an inappropriate relationship and convinced her that they were in love. Kevin, a man in his 40s, had a sinister plan. He wanted his wife dead so he could be with Sabrina and collect $750,000 in life insurance money. He filled Sabrina's young mind with promises, lies, and pressure, even threatening to take his own life if she didn't go through with it. Trapped in his control, Sabrina finally gave in. Lisa Knafel was asleep in her home when Sabrina attacked her. In a brutal and frenzied assault, she stabbed Lisa over 130 times. The woman who had taken her in and cared for her died in her bedroom, betrayed by someone she had trusted. When the police arrived, Sabrina was immediately arrested, but the truth of Kevin Knafel's involvement wouldn't come to light until later. He had convinced her to do it, and she had followed his plan. As the case unfolded, shocking details emerged. Sabrina testified in court, revealing how Kevin had manipulated her, using love and fear to make her commit the crime. The jury heard how he had begun a physical relationship with her while she was still a minor and had planned Lisa's murder for financial gain. When the verdict was reached, there was no doubt. Kevin Knafel was the true mastermind. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder and battery. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole for at least 30 years, plus 12 additional years for his crimes against Sabrina.
His defense attorney says his client maintains he is innocent. Knafel was found guilty in June on 11 counts.
As for Sabrina, she pleaded guilty to aggravated murder. Though she was a teenager at the time and had been manipulated, she still had to face the consequences of her actions. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, but with a chance of parole after 30 years. As soon as Sabrina heard the word of the judge, she broke down in court. This case left a devastating impact. A mother was murdered in her own home. A teenage girl, once a foster child in need of love and support, was turned into a killer. A man who should have been a protector was exposed as a master manipulator who destroyed lives for greed and selfish desires. Sabrina expressed remorse at her sentencing, but nothing could undo what had happened. The Knafel family was torn apart forever. Sabrina is trapped in a sinister web of deception, but the next case reveals how a pizza order turns into a fierce act of revenge.
She's not some innocent bystander. Chad did not have control over her actions, her wrongdoings. Erica Stefanko controlled her actions.
On a quiet summer evening in June 2012, 25-year-old Ashley Biggs, a hard-working pizza delivery driver, received an order. She had no idea that this call would lead her into a deadly trap. Ashley was a mother fighting for custody of her young daughter, and her life was about to be taken in a cruel and calculated murder. The order was placed by Erica Stefanko, who was married to Chad Cobb at the time. Chad was Ashley's ex-boyfriend, and they had been locked in a bitter custody battle over their 7-year-old daughter. Erica and Chad didn't just want to win custody, they wanted Ashley gone forever. Erica lured Ashley to a vacant parking lot by ordering a pizza at that location. When Ashley arrived, Chad was waiting in the shadows. He attacked her, tasing her before brutally beating and strangling her. After the murder, Chad and Erica drove her body to Chippewa Township, where they abandoned it in her car. The next day, police discovered Ashley's lifeless body. It didn't take long to connect the crime to Chad Cobb. He was arrested and, facing overwhelming evidence, pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And the father of the child is Chad Cobb.
You have an electrical restraint device.
Although Chad was behind bars, Erica was free. For years, authorities suspected she had played a bigger role in the murder than she admitted. However, it wasn't until 2019, 7 years later, that she was finally arrested and charged. Her first trial took place in 2020. A key witness against her was none other than Chad Cobb himself. He testified that Erica was involved in planning the murder, but his testimony was given remotely due to COVID-19 restrictions. The jury found Erica guilty, and she was sentenced to life in prison. However, Erica's lawyers later argued that Chad's video testimony was unfair. In 2022, a court overturned her conviction, giving her a second chance. In 2024, Erica's retrial began. This time, Chad testified in person. He changed his story, now claiming that Erica was the one who strangled Ashley with a zip tie. Prosecutors still believe Chad was the actual killer, but one fact remained the same. Erica helped set the entire plan in motion. The jury didn't need long to decide. After just 2 days of deliberation, they found Erica guilty again. On Wednesday, Erica Stefanko was sentenced to life in prison for her role in Ashley's murder. She'll be eligible for parole after serving 30 years. Her emotionless face shows that she has no regrets.
A life sentence with eligibility of parole after 20 or 25 or 30 years, or a life sentence without the eligibility or possibility of parole.
Summit County Prosecutor Sherry Bevan Walsh expressed gratitude to the jury and law enforcement, saying, "For 12 years, we have fought for justice for Ashley. Today, for a second time, the Summit County jury found Erica Stefanko guilty." This case is a heart-wrenching reminder that jealousy and revenge can lead to unimaginable cruelty. It's also a testament to perseverance. Justice may be delayed, but it never ceases in its pursuit of the truth. She will always be remembered as a violent offender. The next case proves that when heartbreak turns into obsession, the consequences can be deadly.
The woman accused of killing her estranged husband's girlfriend took the stand in her own defense today and admitted to the stabbing. Michelle Boat is charged with first-degree murder. Police say she stabbed Tracy Mondabaugh outside the apartment she shared with her husband in Pella.
On May 18, 2020, in the quiet town of Pella, Iowa, a brutal crime shocked the community. Michelle Boat, a 56-year-old woman, was arrested for the murder of Tracy Mondabaugh, her estranged husband's new girlfriend. What started as heartbreak turned into a tragic and violent crime that would send Michelle to prison for the rest of her life. Michelle Boat had been married to Nick Boat for 20 years, but in 2020, their marriage ended when Nick left her for another woman, Tracy Mondabaugh. Heartbroken and struggling, Michelle was left alone, jobless, and nearly out of money. She watched as her husband moved on with Tracy, and the pain became unbearable. On the day of the murder, Michelle had followed Tracy, watching her meet Nick. When she saw them kiss, it pushed her over the edge. Michelle then drove to Tracy's house and waited for the perfect moment to strike. Later that day, as Tracy sat in her truck, Michelle approached. What happened next was brutal. Michelle stabbed Tracy multiple times, leaving her with fatal injuries. After the attack, Michelle fled the scene, leaving Tracy to die in her vehicle. Authorities quickly gathered evidence linking Michelle to the crime. Tracy's blood was found in Michelle's car, and Michelle's DNA was discovered in Tracy's hair. Text messages also revealed that Michelle had been threatening Tracy weeks before the murder.
She was hitting me and hitting me and hitting me. I just stabbed her and I dropped the knife.
During her trial, Michelle's defense team argued that the killing was not premeditated, but a crime of passion. They claimed Michelle was emotionally unstable due to her recent divorce, the stress of the COVID-19 pandemic, and her financial struggles. They hoped to convince the jury that Michelle should be found guilty of voluntary manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. But the prosecution painted a different picture. They showed that Michelle had been planning the crime for weeks. She had gloves, binoculars, and a knife ready. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was a calculated murder. After hearing all of the evidence, the jury needed less than an hour to make their decision. In May 2021, Michelle Boat was found guilty of first-degree murder. The mandatory sentence for this crime in Iowa is life in prison without parole. Michelle showed little emotion as the verdict was read. Her appeal plans were later announced, but her chances of overturning the sentence remained slim. Tracy Mondabaugh, the innocent victim, left behind 4 children and 10 grandchildren who will never see her again. This case is a heartbreaking reminder of how jealousy and heartbreak can lead to unimaginable consequences. Instead of moving on, Michelle let her emotions drive her to commit a horrific crime. Now, she will spend the rest of her life behind bars, while Tracy's loved ones continue to grieve their loss. Michelle Boat's jealousy led to a ruthless crime. Our next case shows an affair didn't just lead to betrayal, it ended with a chilling execution in broad daylight.
There's somebody hurt. Yes, she was on the ground, had a girl on the ground. Husband's a cop. The person just ran down the alley.
Shauna Nelson seemed to have it all. A loving husband, children, and a stable job as a 911 dispatcher. But deep down, she wanted more. She fell in love with another man, Detective Ignacio Guerras. Their affair led to secrets, betrayals, and ultimately a shocking murder that stunned the town of Greeley, Colorado. Shauna married Ken Nelson, a sheriff's deputy, in 1996, and they built a life together. However, after years of marriage, she started an affair with Ignacio, who was also married. She hoped he would leave his wife, Heather Garris, for her, but Ignacio refused. When she became pregnant with his child, he asked her to terminate the pregnancy. She refused and instead tried to make things work with Ken once again. Heather, unaware of the full extent of Ignacio's affair, was devastated when she found out. Still, she chose to fight for her marriage, and Ignacio promised to break things off with Shauna. He did so over the phone, with Heather listening beside him. Shauna was furious. Just 2 days after Ignacio cut ties with her, Heather was leaving for work on January 23, 2007. As she stepped into the parking lot, a masked figure dressed in black approached her with a gun. The attacker ordered her to kneel and then shot her twice in the head. She died within minutes.
Shauna Nelson committed this murder and the evidence proves it. I want to talk about a couple things, and I'm going to go quick because I don't have a lot of time with you here today.
When the police arrived, Heather's co-workers immediately suspected Shauna. They had heard the threats and knew how obsessed she was with Ignacio. A police alert was sent out for her. At the time, Ken was in a squad room briefing when he heard his wife was the prime suspect in a murder. Driving home, Ken saw Shauna behind the wheel of his truck. He jumped out, blocked her off, and yelled, "What have you done?" Inside the truck, police found a Grim Reaper mask, just like the one described by witnesses. Shauna was arrested on the spot. At first, Shauna denied any involvement in the murder, but as the investigation continued, her best friend, Michelle Moore, was also arrested. It turned out that Michelle had helped Shauna plan the crime. She later confessed to the police, revealing that Shauna wanted to frame Ken by wearing his clothes, driving his truck, and leaving behind misleading evidence.
After December of 2006, by email?
I don't know if it was email. I know that we had exchanged phone calls.
You don't remember saying it was by email?
I don't.
Okay.
Shauna's trial began in February 2008. The prosecution presented 120 exhibits that testified against her. When Shauna finally took the stand, she made a shocking claim. She said she and Michelle had been lovers and that Michelle was framing her out of revenge, but Michelle denied everything, and the jury didn't believe Shauna's story. On March 3, 2008, after just 1 day of deliberation, the jury found Shauna Nelson guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michelle Moore, for her part in the crime, was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but was later released. Ken divorced Shauna and moved out of state with their children. Ignacio resigned from the police department and relocated to Florida. Shauna still claims she was framed, but her appeals have been denied. This case is heartbreaking on so many levels. A woman lost her life simply because another couldn't accept rejection. A child lost her mother. Families were torn apart. Shauna's obsession with Ignacio led her down a dark path, and in the end, she destroyed everything, including herself. Up next, the case of Sidney Powell.
Please! Ma'am! Ma'am! She's recording now! No! Stop! We gotta figure out what's going on!
The home that once radiated warmth and laughter had become a place of nightmares, its walls stained with the memory of an unthinkable crime. Sidney Powell, 23, sat in the courtroom, her face sealed by an act that shattered the quiet peace of Akron. Just a few years earlier, she had been a promising college student, a young woman with dreams and ambitions. But in March 2020, everything took a turn. Overcome with rage, she attacked her mother, striking her with a cast-iron skillet before stabbing her repeatedly. Sidney had always struggled in school, and despite her efforts, she was eventually dismissed from college. Afraid of disappointing her parents, she kept it a secret, pretending everything was fine. She maintained the lie, hoping to fix things before they discovered the truth. But secrets have a way of coming to light. One day, her mother, Brenda Powell, learned the truth. A dedicated child life specialist at Akron Children's Hospital, Brenda was known for her kindness and compassion. She had spent years helping children and families through difficult times, always offering support and understanding. When Brenda confronted Sidney, fear overwhelmed her. What should have been an honest conversation between mother and daughter turned into a heart-wrenching moment that changed their lives forever. A heated argument spiraled out of control, and in a fit of rage, Sidney grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet and struck her mother. But Brenda didn't collapse immediately. She turned, pain and shock in her eyes, and that was when Sidney made a devastating choice. Overcome with fear and rage, she ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and attacked in a frenzy. But when the rage faded, reality struck hard. The once warm and loving home now felt cold and lifeless. Sidney stood frozen, staring at the horror before her. When investigators arrived, they were stunned. Friends and family struggled to understand what had driven her to such an extreme. As the truth unfolded, it became clear that buried emotions, years of tension, and one fateful moment had led to an unimaginable tragedy. A once unbreakable bond had been shattered forever. Sydney's legal team argued that she suffered from severe schizophrenia. They claimed she experienced a psychotic break and was unaware of her actions, pleading for a verdict of not guilty because of insanity. However, the jury disagreed. They found Sydney Powell guilty of 2 counts of murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. Prosecutors argued she was fully aware of her actions, and despite the tragedy, justice had to be served. On a somber day in court, Judge Kelly McLaughlin sentenced Sydney Powell to 15 years to life in prison. As the verdict was announced, tears streamed down her face.
Sentence you to an indefinite sentence of 15 years to life in the Ohio Department of Corrections.
Though her defense team plans to appeal, the ruling brought closure to many mourning Brenda Powell's loss. Sydney's case serves as a tragic reminder of how hidden struggles can lead to devastating consequences. A mother lost her life, a family was shattered, and a young woman's future was ruined in an instant. Some believe Sydney should have received mental health treatment instead of prison, while others argued justice was rightfully served. Regardless of the perspective, one thing remains clear. Brenda Powell was a beloved mother and community member whose life was cut short by unimaginable violence. Powell's tragic story left an entire nation in disbelief. The next case reveals a heart-wrenching act by a mother that no one could have predicted.
My heart and my mind are consumed with despair, pain, sadness, grief, unceasing anguish, and extreme remorse.
On April 18, 2019, Joanne Cunningham called the police, reporting that her 5-year-old son, AJ Friend, was missing. She claimed she had put him to bed the night before, but by morning, he was gone. A massive search was launched in Crystal Lake, Illinois, quickly drawing national attention. Initially, authorities treated AJ's disappearance as a routine missing child case. However, as investigators dug deeper, inconsistencies emerged. Searching the family home uncovered disturbing conditions, broken windows, filth, and an unbearable stench. But the worst was yet to come. 6 days after AJ was reported missing, his father, Andrew Friend Sr., finally confessed. Overcome with guilt, he led investigators to a desolate area, 10 miles from their home. There lay AJ in a shallow grave and wrapped in plastic. The search had ended, but the grim truth was just beginning to unfold. An autopsy revealed AJ had suffered severe head trauma. Investigators worked relentlessly to reconstruct his final moments, uncovering a devastating reality. On April 15th, AJ made a simple mistake. He soiled his clothes. Instead of comforting him, his mother inflicted a cruel punishment. She forced him into a freezing shower where he shivered and wept. Rather than wrapping him in warm clothes or tucking him into bed, she sent him to sleep cold, wet, and alone. By morning, AJ was gone. His short life, marked by suffering, had come to a tragic end. The painful truth ensured his story would never be forgotten. His suffering was no longer silent, and justice was finally on its way. Cunningham was arrested and charged with the unthinkable crime of taking her own son's life. When she stood before the judge, she admitted what she had done. The courtroom was silent as the judge spoke about the agony and suffering that little AJ had endured. He had lived a life filled with neglect, fear, and mistreatment at the hands of the person who was supposed to love and protect him the most. Despite everything, the defendant wept in court, saying she wished she could bring AJ back. But her words could not undo the years of mistreatment or the grievous end that he faced. The judge, unmoved by her tears, made it clear that there would be no second chances. She received a 35-year prison sentence, ensuring she would never harm another child again. She would also serve 3 additional years under supervised release and be required to register as a violent offender against youth. At the time of condemnation, tears streamed down her face as she realized what she had done wrong.
I'll never be able to justify anything, nor do I ever want to.
AJ's story is a heartbreaking reminder that every child deserves love, safety, and protection. Nothing could ever erase the pain of his short and tragic life. Prosecutors described AJ's life as one filled with misery. He was born into addiction. His mother tested positive for the substance at birth. Child Welfare Services took him away, but later returned him to his parents, believing they had changed. But the mistreatment never stopped. AJ's story is an aching reminder of the dangers of child maltreatment and the need to protect vulnerable children. Though his short life was marked by suffering, his memory calls us to action to ensure no child endures the same fate. Our next case reveals how a trusted figure betrayed her own family for money.
Ku sweswo hinkwaswo a ndzi endlanga mara loko court yo yi ku yi ni vona nandzu a ku na lexi nga ta xi endla. Ka tifamily hinkwato kusukela ka family ya ka Mabasa ya ka Mashego.
Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was a respected police sergeant in South Africa. She rose from humble beginnings, leaving her home in Bushbuckridge to build a better future in Johannesburg. After joining the South African Police Service, or SAPS, she was stationed at the Tembisa police station. But beneath the uniform and badge, she concealed a chilling secret. She was a cold-blooded killer who murdered her own family for financial gain. Between 2012 and 2018, Ndlovu meticulously orchestrated the murders of 6 family members and her long-term partner. Her motive was chillingly simple. She wanted to collect life and funeral insurance payouts. Over the years, she pocketed approximately 1.4 million rand, or roughly $93,000, from these deaths, using the money to fuel her gambling addiction. Her killing spree began on March 2012 with her cousin, Madala Witness Homu, who was found beaten to death. His murder earned Ndlovu over 131,000 rand in insurance payouts. In June 2013, she poisoned and strangled her sister, Audrey, collecting more than 717,000 rand from various policies. That same month, her niece, Zanella Maltha, was brutally beaten to death, netting her an additional 119,840 rand. But Ndlovu wasn't finished. In October 2015, her boyfriend and the father of her child, Maurice Mabasa, was found in Olifantsfontein with 76 stab wounds. His murder brought her another 131,000 rand in insurance claims. 2 years later, in April 2017, her nephew, Mayani Mashaba, was murdered just a day after meeting with her. Her final known victim was Brilliant Mashego, her nephew and the son of her murdered sister, Audrey. He was last seen alive in her company on January 22, 2018. 2 days later, his body was found in Bushbuckridge. For 6 years, Ndlovu deceived investigators and insurance companies, but in 2018, her reign of terror came to an end when she took her crimes a step further. She attempted to hire hitmen to set her sister Joyce and her 5 children on fire inside their home. This time, however, the men she contacted were undercover police officers. During her trial, she broke down, realizing there was no escape. The officers had recorded her giving detailed instructions on the gruesome crime, sealing her fate. In 2021, Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu stood trial for her crimes. The evidence against her was overwhelming. She had targeted her own family, people who trusted and loved her, just for the sake of money. The court found her guilty of 6 murders, as well as charges of fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to 6 concurrent life terms for the murders, plus an additional 30 years for her crimes.
I accordingly impose the following sentence on accused. The accused is sentenced to life imprisonment on each count.
Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu's story is one of greed and betrayal. She saw her own family as nothing more than paychecks, leaving devastation in her wake. Families were torn apart, children lost their parents, and trust was shattered beyond repair. Her case is a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from those we trust the most. Rosemary's cold-blooded pursuit of wealth through murder is chilling. The next case explores how lies can lead to an unfathomable tragedy.
I found the woman this morning on the side of the road, and her baby's been removed from her body, and then you show up with a baby.
On a quiet morning in October 2020 in New Boston, Texas, Regan Simmons Hancock, a young mother, was at home with her 3-year-old daughter, eagerly awaiting the arrival of her second child. At 35 weeks pregnant, she had no idea that a friend, Taylor Parker, was about to arrive with a chilling plan. Taylor had spent months pretending to be pregnant, faking ultrasounds, hosting a gender reveal party, and convincing everyone she was expecting. But there was a major flaw in her scheme. There was no baby. As her lies began to unravel, her desperation grew, and she resorted to extreme measures to make her deception a reality. What should have been a peaceful morning turned tragic, forever altering the lives of those involved. In the quiet of her home, Taylor, driven by a disturbing motive, launched a violent attack on Regan, causing unimaginable pain. As the situation unfolded, Regan's 3-year-old daughter played nearby, oblivious to the horror unfolding around her. Despite Regan's strength and courage, she and her unborn baby could not survive the ordeal. Thankfully, her daughter remained unharmed. After stealing the baby, Taylor sped away, attempting to make it look as though she had just given birth. She was soon pulled over for driving erratically. When officers approached, they saw a newborn in her lap, but something was off. The umbilical cord appeared to be coming from her pants, a feeble attempt to simulate a recent birth. She was taken to the hospital, where doctors quickly uncovered the truth. There was no evidence that Taylor had given birth, and the baby wasn't hers. Meanwhile, back at Regan's home, the authorities discovered the horrifying crime scene. After the trial, Regan's mother, Jessica Brooks, said, "Now we can stop crying." She described how her daughter had still been alive, fighting for her baby while Taylor brutally attacked her.
The heavy burden feels lifted. I feel like now we can start trying to heal. We don't have this over our heads. We know where she's going to be. We know where she's at. And
prosecutors exposed Taylor's months of deception, showing how she manipulated those around her into believing her fake pregnancy. Even Regan's husband, Homer Hancock, admitted that Taylor was somewhat of a friend. She had even taken their wedding and engagement photos. Despite the defense's argument that Taylor's family and friends should have noticed the signs of her fake pregnancy, the jury showed no mercy. Given the gruesome nature of the crime, they sentenced her to death. Taylor became emotional as she heard her sentence, but she had to face the consequences of her actions. Regan was a loving mother, wife, and friend who trusted the wrong person. The fact that her daughter was in the home during the crime makes the tragedy even more profound. A husband lost his wife, a little girl lost her mother, and a baby was never able to take its first breath. Taylor Parker now sits on death row, awaiting the ultimate punishment for her heinous crime. Up next, Bailey Boswell, a case of deception and brutality that led to one of the most disturbing murder investigations in recent history.
Charges have been filed against Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell, the two persons of interest in the disappearance and death of Sydney Lou. Charges of first-degree murder and improper disposal of human skeletal remains were filed yesterday in Saline County.
In November 2017, Sydney Lou, a 24-year-old from Nebraska, was looking for a fresh start after struggles in her personal life. Like many others, she turned to Tinder. Her match? Bailey Boswell, a charming woman with an inviting smile and a story that seemed intriguing. Sydney eagerly planned a second date with Bailey, but little did she know that meeting would be the last chapter of her life. The night of their date, Sydney texted a friend saying how excited she was, even leaving her location pinned for safety. When Sydney didn't show up for work the next day, her family grew concerned. After a frantic search, investigators uncovered a chilling discovery. Sydney's dismembered remains, packed in trash bags, scattered in rural Nebraska.
But after weeks of searching, Louf's body was found in rural Clay County near Edgar, Nebraska in December. She died of suffocation.
The police soon zeroed in on Bailey and her boyfriend, Aubrey Trail, who were linked to Sydney's disappearance. Surveillance footage captured Bailey and Aubrey buying tools like saws and bleach, items investigators believed were used to carry out their grisly crime. Bailey and Aubrey's twisted scheme unraveled during questioning. Aubrey claimed Sydney's death was an accident during a bizarre group fantasy. However, prosecutors painted a far darker picture. Sydney had been lured into a trap. Text messages revealed Bailey had groomed Sydney for days, building trust to carry out their deadly plan.
She did not survive. This death was up close. It was personal. Strangled her, face to face, eye to eye. Squeezed the life out of her.
In court, chilling details of the couple's obsession with dark fantasies left the jury stunned. Evidence showed they had planned to kill for months, targeting vulnerable women through dating apps. In 2021, Bailey Boswell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, narrowly avoiding the death penalty. Her partner, Aubrey Trail, received a death sentence, cementing their roles in one of Nebraska's most haunting crimes. The courtroom was filled with emotion as Sydney's family spoke of a light extinguished too soon.
Greatly missed by Minnie. She was a great person. We love her so much. A lot of people do, obviously, in the family.
Sydney's parents described their unimaginable grief, calling Bailey a monster who betrayed their daughter's trust. In court, Bailey showed little remorse, maintaining a cold, detached demeanor that only added to the heartbreak of Sydney's loved ones. The community mourned the loss of a kind-hearted young woman whose life was stolen by calculated evil. Up next, Claire Miller, a shocking case of a teenage girl whose actions shattered lives in an unimaginable way.
She stabbed her sister Helen, who had cerebral palsy, on the morning of February 22, 2021. Her parents testified at trial that they had lost Helen and didn't want to lose Claire as well to prison.
In the early morning hours of February 22, 2021, the Manheim Township Police Department was called to the Miller family home after 14-year-old Claire Miller, who had an active TikTok presence, made a 911 call, admitting that she had killed her sister. When the officers arrived at the scene, they found Claire outside, standing in the snow with blood on her pajama pants. Claire led the officers inside, directing them to the bedroom where Helen Miller, 19 years old, lay lifeless. Helen, who had been born with cerebral palsy, relied on a wheelchair for mobility and was unable to walk. The Miller family had adapted their home to meet Helen's needs, ensuring that she had a safe and comfortable space to live.
A teen accused of killing her sister will be staying in Lancaster County until her trial. 16-year-old Claire Miller will be tried as an adult. The judge determined Miller will stay in Lancaster County.
Claire was taken into custody immediately. Under Pennsylvania law, homicide is not considered a juvenile crime, meaning that Claire, despite her age, had to be charged as an adult. This legal requirement was not a decision made lightly, as it involved treating a young teenager with the same legal process reserved for adults charged with serious offenses.
Claire Miller was a kid who had it all but was obsessed with homicide. Citing thousands of text messages she sent a friend expressing a desire to harm someone, saying even though she loved her sister Helen, she stabbed her to death.
The legal process that followed focused heavily on Claire's mental health. She was found to have been experiencing a mental health crisis at the time of the incident. In Pennsylvania, third-degree murder is defined as an unintentional killing that results from reckless or depraved actions. It is distinct from first-degree murder, which requires premeditation, and second-degree murder, which involves killing occurring during the commission of another serious crime.
Claire Miller was sentenced to 12 and a half to 40 years in prison, pleading guilty to third-degree murder. Lancaster County judge overlooking the case determined
in 2023, Claire, now 16, pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. This plea was significant because it indicated that Claire accepted responsibility for her actions, but did not admit to premeditation or intent to kill. By pleading guilty, she acknowledged that her behavior showed a disregard for human life, which resulted in her sister's death.
Miller was mentally ill but not mentally disabled when imposing the sentence. Back on February 22nd of 2021, Manheim Township Police discovered Miller's 19-year-old sister.
During the sentencing hearing, District Attorney Heather Adams described the case as particularly tragic, emphasizing that Helen's vulnerability and Claire's actions made the situation even more painful. Heather Adams noted that while the mental health crisis Claire experienced was a factor, it did not erase her responsibility for Helen's death. The prosecutor pointed out that the court needed to balance the need for accountability with Claire's young age and mental state at the time of the crime.
Via video conference, she's charged with killing her disabled sister Helen in their Manheim Township home in February.
The judge ultimately sentenced Claire to 12 and a half to 40 years in prison. This decision aimed to hold her accountable for what had happened, but also left room for the possibility of rehabilitation over time. Claire's guilty plea and the subsequent sentencing highlighted the complex challenge of balancing justice with compassion, particularly in cases involving minors and mental health issues.
In Manheim Township, called police a little after 1 a.m. and said she had killed her sister. Officers responded to the home where Claire pointed them to a bedroom.
For the Miller family, this case was devastating on multiple fronts. They had already endured the unimaginable pain of losing Helen, who had been cherished and an integral part of their lives. The grief of that loss was compounded by the reality that Claire would now face years of imprisonment. Further, the family was left to try to come to terms with the painful contradiction of loving Claire and mourning Helen, knowing that the actions of one had changed their entire family forever. Claire Miller's tragic actions within her own family were shocking, but the next case reveals a tale of manipulation and greed with devastating consequences. Kelsey Turner, a former model whose entanglement in a deadly scheme, showed how far some will go to protect their secrets.
Judy was worried about this woman, 25-year-old Playboy and Maxim model Kelsey Turner. Judy says Kelsey was extorting money from Dr. Burchard.
Kelsey Turner was once a prominent figure in the adult modeling industry, appearing on the covers of Playboy Italia and Maxim, and amassing a considerable following on social media. She spent her time between Salinas, California and Las Vegas, Nevada, working to build her career. However, as the modeling industry proved to be highly unpredictable, opportunities began to dry up, and Turner faced significant financial struggles. By this point, she was also a single mother.
Burchard had a history of helping others and engaging with young, attractive girls he met online, like Kelsey. That's according to his friend, who did not want to be identified.
In the late 2010s, Turner entered a financial agreement with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a 71-year-old child psychiatrist. Over several years, Burchard provided her with over $750,000, covering expenses like her car insurance and the rent for her Las Vegas home. According to Judy Earp, Burchard's fiancée, many people asked for the doctor's help, but Kelsey was different. Judy claimed that Kelsey had often requested money under the guise of needing it for her son's medication or other emergencies.
Judy Earp, his girlfriend of 17 years, was back at their home in California and sensed the doctor was in trouble.
By early 2019, Judy, who suspected that Burchard was experiencing the early stages of dementia, urged him to end the relationship. Burchard agreed and planned to confront Turner on March 1, 2019, to tell her he would no longer provide financial support. He never returned from that trip.
Maybe I ought to just come home on the next flight.
Judy Erb reported Burchard missing, prompting an investigation. On March 7th, police discovered Burchard's abandoned Mercedes-Benz in the Las Vegas desert. Inside, they found blood, gloves, and a baseball bat. The trunk contained a body wrapped in bedsheets, identified as Dr. Burchard through a credit card found at the scene. During the autopsy, the medical examiner concluded that Burchard had died from blunt force trauma, ruling his death a homicide.
Repeatedly that these are not, the kind of people you want to be associating with.
Detectives interviewed Judy, who shared details about Burchard's plans to cut ties with Kelsey. When they searched Kelsey's home, they found evidence of blood and an attempt to clean up the scene. Using cell phone data, authorities tracked Kelsey and her roommates, Diana Pina and John Kennison, to the Rio Hotel. By the time officers arrived, the three were gone.
Were living and where investigators believe Dr. Burchard was murdered. Kelsey's roommate, Diana Pena, told a grand jury that Kennison attacked Dr. Burchard with a baseball bat.
The investigation took a key turn when Burchard's journal was found, containing entries about accusations Kelsey made against him involving inappropriate images of children. Despite these allegations, no evidence of such material was found on Burchard's electronic devices. Judy stated that the accusations had deeply troubled Burchard due to his professional background.
Kelsey's roommate, Diana Pena, pleaded guilty to accessory to murder and is expected to testify at their trials.
Kelsey, Diana, and John were eventually located. Fingerprints from Burchard's car matched those of Diana and John. Diana admitted to police that Kelsey had been upset when she learned Burchard planned to cut her off financially. She said Kelsey had ordered John to confront Burchard, which led to John fatally hitting him with a baseball bat. John then drove Burchard's car with the body in the trunk and abandoned it in the desert.
It looks like she received an own recognizance release, so she's getting some pretty preferential treatment here, and it's going to be interesting to see if the jury thinks, in fact, she could be the bad person.
Diana Pena agreed to a plea deal for being an accessory to murder and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. John Kennison pled guilty to murder and received an 18 to 45-year prison sentence in 2022. Kelsey Turner took an Alford plea, acknowledging the strength of the evidence against her without admitting guilt. She was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison and will be eligible for parole when she is 36 years old in 2029. During her court proceedings, Kelsey Turner's behavior drew attention, as she was often seen smiling and posing for the cameras, which many found surprising given the serious charges she faced.
3.75 years that she has already spent incarcerated and still shows no sign of rehabilitation.
While some interpreted her actions as an attempt to appear confident or maintain composure, others saw them as evidence of indifference to the crime and its consequences. Currently, Kelsey Turner is serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Nevada. These killers, consumed by jealousy, manipulation, and obsession, have forever altered the course of countless lives. Their courtroom appearances were chilling reminders of the depths of human cruelty. But the stories don't end here. In our next video on screen, we'll dig deeper into more heart-wrenching sentences that follow.